The 10 truths about self-doubt that nobody wants to address, that can change your life. What if I told you that self-doubt is not just a passing hesitation, but a hidden architect silently designing the way you live, think, and define yourself? Every pause before you act, every opportunity you abandon, every time you silence your own voice, you are not simply being cautious. You are carving invisible walls that limit the space of your existence. Self-doubt is not a random feeling. It is a mental structure, trained and reinforced over years. One that whispers with authority, "You are not ready. You are not capable. You are not enough." Think about the chances you let slip away. The words you wanted to say but didn't. The projects you dreamed of starting but postponed. The moments you wanted to step forward but chose to remain in the background. They may appear like isolated episodes of insecurity, but neuroscience shows they are more than that. They are lessons your brain records. Each hesitation activates circuits that strengthen avoidance. Your nervous system learns that retreat is safer than exposure, and over time, this becomes a pattern. Andrew Huberman's research on dopamine reveals that the brain does not only reward achievement, it also rewards avoidance when avoidance reduces immediate stress. In other words, every time you withdraw, you may feel a subtle relief, and that relief becomes addictive. This is why self-doubt is not just an emotion, but a cycle of reinforcement. You doubt, you retreat, you feel temporary relief, and your brain marks that path as the easier one. The more you walk that path, the deeper the trail becomes. Just like water carving valleys into stone, your hesitation shapes your character without you even realizing it. That is why so many intelligent, creative, and capable people find themselves paralyzed not by external obstacles, but by an internal script that convinces them not to begin. Jordan Peterson often insists that meaning in life is discovered when we face chaos voluntarily. Self-doubt convinces you to avoid chaos, to remain in order, to keep yourself small in the name of safety. Yet that safety is an illusion, because the world does not remain still while you hesitate. Opportunities move on, time passes, and while you protect yourself from failure, you also protect yourself from growth. The Stoics knew this deeply. Marcus Aurelius wrote that we suffer more in our imagination than in reality, and self-doubt is the perfect example. We create scenarios of failure, so vivid in our minds that they feel more real than any success we could build. But here is the paradox. Self-doubt is not your enemy. It is a messenger. It reveals the gap between who you are today and who you could become. René Descartes once said that doubt is the beginning of wisdom. The problem is that most people stop there. They stay frozen in the question and never move to the answer. Doubt without action becomes poison. Doubt integrated into action becomes power. That is why in this video we are not going to repeat shallow advice about just believing in yourself. That kind of talk may inspire for a moment but collapses at the first challenge. Instead, we will uncover the 10 raw truths about self-doubt that almost nobody talks about, because they are uncomfortable. They reveal that self-doubt is not only psychological, but also biological. Not only personal, but also cultural. Not only an obstacle, but also a mirror of your potential. Some of these truths will challenge your current view of yourself. They will confront you with the voices you carry inside, with the addictions of your mind, with the fears you disguise as logic. And here is the promise. If you allow yourself to face these truths honestly, you will never see your hesitation in the same way again. You will recognize when your brain is tricking you, when your emotions are disguising avoidance as caution, when your mind is using borrowed voices to silence your own. You will see that self-doubt is not a sign of weakness but a test of strength, and that the presence of doubt often signals that you are standing close to the doorway of transformation. So let us begin. The first truth may sound shocking, but it explains why so many people feel chained to hesitation, even when they know better. Self-doubt is not just a thought. It is an addiction. Truth number 1, self-doubt is an addiction. Most people think of self-doubt as a passing feeling, like a cloud drifting through the mind. But neuroscience reveals something much deeper. Self-doubt can behave like an addiction. Each time you hesitate, retreat, or abandon an idea, your brain releases a subtle wave of relief. That relief is tied to dopamine, the neurotransmitter that governs reward and motivation. Paradoxically, by avoiding risk, your brain rewards you for playing it safe, teaching you that hesitation is the easier, more comfortable path. Over time, that small chemical release becomes a trap, pulling you back into the cycle again and again. Imagine someone who wants to speak up in a meeting. Their heart races, their palms sweat, their mind fills with "what if I sound foolish?" At the last moment, they remain silent. Instantly, the discomfort fades, and with it comes a deceptive calm. The brain marks that as success. See, you avoided danger. Well done. In truth, nothing was gained, but the mind has been trained to repeat the same avoidance in the future. This is the addictive loop of self-doubt: fear, retreat, relief, reinforcement. Andrew Huberman explains that dopamine is not only about pleasure, but about prediction. When your brain predicts that retreat will lower your stress, it anticipates the relief and primes you to choose that path again. And like any addiction, the more you feed it, the more powerful it becomes. Soon, hesitation becomes instinct, second-guessing becomes habit, and you find yourself trapped in patterns of inaction that feel almost automatic. Philosophers long before neuroscience also saw this truth. Seneca observed that we suffer more often in imagination than in reality. Each imagined failure becomes a trigger for retreat, and each retreat deepens the craving for more safety. The irony is that this craving does not protect you, it shrinks you. Like a drug, it numbs the immediate pain but steals the possibility of growth. To break this cycle, you must treat self-doubt not as a fleeting mood, but as an addictive pattern of thought. That means becoming aware of the reward your brain is secretly giving you for hesitation. Once you see the mechanism, you can resist the urge to retreat, even when it feels easier in the moment. The key is not to eliminate doubt, but to starve the addictive relief that comes from running away. Truth number 2: confidence isn't the opposite of self-doubt. We are often told that the cure for self-doubt is confidence, as if these two forces were enemies standing on opposite sides of the battlefield. But that is a comforting illusion. Confidence is not the opposite of self-doubt, and chasing confidence as the antidote often leaves people more frustrated than before. What truly dismantles self-doubt is not blind confidence, but clarity and structure. Think about it. Confidence without clarity is like building a house on sand. It may stand for a moment, but the first wave of uncertainty will sweep it away. That is why so many people appear confident on the surface, but collapse when life presents real chaos. They have trained themselves to feel strong without cultivating the discipline that actually makes them strong. Jordan Peterson insists that stability comes not from pretending to be fearless, but from voluntarily facing what terrifies you with structure, order, and responsibility. Neuroscience supports this. Andrew Huberman explains that the brain thrives on predictability when building resilience. A person who creates daily routines, structured goals, and small, consistent challenges builds neurological patterns of stability. In that stability, doubt has less space to grow because the brain already knows the path forward. What looks like confidence from the outside is really the byproduct of inner clarity and disciplined repetition. The Stoics would have agreed. Marcus Aurelius never wrote about becoming confident. He wrote about aligning daily actions with principles so that doubt loses its grip. Confidence was not the goal, it was the natural result of living with order, reason, and discipline. So the truth is this: if you chase confidence, you will remain chained to doubt, forever waiting for a feeling that will vanish when tested. But if you pursue clarity and structure clear goals, disciplined habits, defined principles, then confidence will quietly appear. Not as a mask, but as a reflection of your inner order. Confidence is not the light that destroys doubt. It is the shadow cast when clarity stands firm. Truth number 3: self-doubt protects your ego, not your life. On the surface, self-doubt feels like a defense mechanism. It whispers, "Be careful. Don't embarrass yourself. Don't fail. Don't take unnecessary risks. We assume it exists to protect us, but if we look closely, we see that self-doubt rarely protects our life. It protects our ego. What it truly guards is the fragile image we hold of ourselves. The identity we fear might collapse if we step into the unknown and stumble. Think of the times you hesitated before trying something new. Was it really danger you were avoiding, or was it the possibility of being seen as inadequate? Most of the time, self-doubt is not about survival, but about reputation. Your reputation in your own eyes, and in the eyes of others. You fear the collapse of the story you tell yourself. I am capable, I am intelligent, I am prepared. To risk failure is to risk tearing holes in that story, and the mind resists it with all its strength. Philosophically, René Descartes believed that doubt could strip away illusions to uncover truth. But when self-doubt is ruled by ego, it does the opposite. It keeps illusions alive. It prevents you from confronting reality, because reality might contradict your self-image. It says better to not try than to discover that you are not who you thought you were. This is how self-doubt traps you, not by shielding you from danger, but by keeping you attached to a fragile identity. Psychology confirms this mechanism. Cognitive behavioral therapy shows that much of what we call fear is actually fear of ego injury. People are less afraid of failing an exam, for instance, than of what failing would mean about them as a person. This distortion magnifies the threat, turning every small risk into a potential identity crisis. And here lies the paradox. The more fragile your ego, the stronger your self-doubt. When your sense of self depends on never making mistakes, doubt will attack every attempt at growth. But when you begin to separate who you are from what you attempt, doubt loses its grip. You realize that failure is not the destruction of identity, but part of its expansion. Self-doubt has never been about keeping you alive. It has always been about keeping you small, preserving the fragile shell of your ego. The moment you recognize this, you begin to ask the liberating question, am I protecting my life, or just protecting my image? Truth number 4. You borrow other people's voices. Most people believe their self-doubt is born entirely within them, a private weakness of the mind. But if you listen carefully, you will notice that the voice of doubt rarely belongs to you. It is borrowed. It carries the tone of a parent who once criticized, a teacher who once dismissed, a friend who once mocked, or even the silent weight of cultural expectations. What you call my doubt is often nothing more than an echo of someone else's voice repeating itself inside your head. Michel de Montaigne observed that we wear the opinions of others like borrowed clothes, and this is nowhere more visible than in self-doubt. A child who is repeatedly told they are clumsy will grow into an adult who hesitates every time they move into unfamiliar territory, even if no one is watching. A young person who is told their dreams are unrealistic will carry that refrain for decades, whispering in their mind every time ambition rises. Doubt becomes inherited memory, not present reality. Neuroscience reveals that repeated messages, especially in formative years, shape neural pathways. The more often you hear a judgment, the more your brain wires itself to anticipate it. Over time, the voice no longer needs to come from outside, it becomes automated within. Andrew Huberman explains that the brain's plasticity is strongest when emotions are intense, which means painful criticism leaves especially deep grooves in memory. What once came from another person now feels like your own inner truth. This is why so many people underestimate themselves. They are living under a script written by others. The tragedy is that they mistake those echoes for self-awareness. But the liberating insight is this: you can challenge the ownership of that voice. The next time you hear the familiar refrain of doubt, ask yourself, whose voice is this really? Is this my genuine reason, or an old echo I've been carrying without question? By separating your authentic perception from borrowed opinions, you begin dismantling the illusion that doubt is entirely yours. In truth, much of what you feel as I can't is simply the residue of someone else's you won't. When you learn to return what was never yours, you create silence. And in that silence, your true voice finally has the space to speak. Truth number 5. Overthinking is a mask for avoidance. At first glance, overthinking feels like caution. You tell yourself that you are analyzing, preparing, weighing every option to make the best decision. But in reality, most overthinking is not wisdom, it is avoidance wearing the mask of logic. Self-doubt uses overthinking as its favorite disguise because it allows you to feel busy while secretly protecting you from action. Cognitive behavioral therapy identifies this pattern clearly. Rumination gives the illusion of problem solving, but it rarely leads to movement. You circle the same thoughts again and again, convincing yourself that just one more round of reflection will bring clarity. Instead, clarity becomes more distant, and paralysis sets in. What began as "I need to be careful" turns into "I cannot begin until I am certain," and certainty never arrives. Neuroscience explains why this trap feels so convincing. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for planning and decision-making, becomes hyperactive under stress, generating scenarios to anticipate every possible outcome. This mental rehearsal may seem protective, but when unchecked, it amplifies fear rather than resolving it. Andrew Huberman points out that the brain, when flooded with uncertainty, can mistake thinking for action, rewarding you with small doses of dopamine for being cautious, even though nothing changes in reality. Philosophy also warns of this danger. Aristotle insisted that virtue is found in action, not in endless contemplation. Seneca observed that we are always getting ready to live, but never living. When overthinking replaces movement, life is reduced to preparation without experience, and self-doubt flourishes in that untested space. Here lies the hidden truth. Overthinking is not a sign that you are careful, but that you are afraid. It is doubt convincing you that stalling is strategy. The real strategy is movement, however imperfect. One honest step forward will reveal more than 1,000 hours of internal debate. When you recognize overthinking for what it is, a mask for avoidance, you strip doubt of one of its most persuasive disguises. Then the choice becomes clear. Keep circling in thought, or risk the discomfort of action that leads to growth. Only one path moves you forward. Truth number 6. Self-doubt thrives in comparison. Self-doubt rarely grows in isolation. It feeds on comparison. The moment you measure yourself against others, you invite doubt to take control. Modern life, especially through social media, amplifies this trap. You scroll through curated images of success, achievement, beauty, and wealth, and your mind begins to whisper, "You're behind. You're not enough. Look at them. Look at you." What was once a passing thought becomes a constant undercurrent, a lens through which you see your entire life. Neuroscience explains why comparison is so powerful. The brain's reward system is highly sensitive to relative status. Dopamine does not simply respond to what you achieve, but to how your achievement compares to others. This is why reaching a personal goal can feel empty if someone else appears to be doing better. The brain interprets external standards as benchmarks for survival, even when they have nothing to do with your purpose. Andrew Huberman notes that this constant benchmarking reshapes neuroplasticity, wiring your sense of worth not to your inner values, but to the shifting images of those around you. The Stoics recognized this danger long before Instagram existed. Epictetus warned that if you measure yourself by what others possess, you will always feel poor, even when you have enough. Self-doubt thrives in this borrowed perspective because it convinces you that your path is meaningless unless it mirrors someone else's. You forget that your journey has a unique rhythm, and you chain yourself to standards that were never yours to begin with. The deeper tragedy is that comparison blinds you to your own progress. You may be growing, learning, and overcoming, yet all of it feels insignificant when placed beside another person's highlight reel. Self-doubt whispers, if you were truly capable, you would already be where they are. And so it robs you not of ability, but of recognition. Breaking this cycle requires a radical shift, anchoring your value in your own trajectory. Neuroplasticity works both ways when you redirect focus toward your personal growth. Celebrating the steps you've taken rather than the distance you lack the brain begins to rewire self-worth internally rather than externally. Self-doubt loses its power when you stop asking, "Am I as good as them?" and start asking, "Am I better than who I was yesterday?" Only then does comparison transform from poison into fuel. Truth number 7. Doubt is stronger in silence. Self-doubt thrives in the unspoken. The more you keep your fears and uncertainties hidden inside your mind, the louder they grow. Thoughts left in silence have a strange power. They echo, multiply, and distort until they feel bigger than reality itself. What begins as a quiet question, "Am I good enough?" becomes a roar when it has no outlet. The brain, left unchecked, repeats the thought in loops, convincing you that silence equals truth. Neuroscience explains why this happens. When you rehearse a thought internally, the brain's circuits treat it as rehearsal for reality. Each repetition strengthens the connection, as if the scenario were already happening. Andrew Huberman often reminds us that the brain does not perfectly distinguish between imagination and experience. What you repeatedly think about becomes what your nervous system prepares for. This is why silent fears gain so much weight. They are rehearsed in the dark until they feel inevitable. But when you bring doubt into the open through journaling, speaking aloud, or sharing with someone you trust, you disrupt the cycle. The moment a fear is expressed, it loses part of its exaggerated shape. On paper, in voice, or in dialogue, what once seemed overwhelming often reveals itself as smaller, more manageable, even irrational. Cognitive behavioral therapy has long used this principle. Labeling thoughts reduces their emotional grip, and externalizing them makes them easier to challenge. Philosophers understood this centuries ago. Marcus Aurelius filled his meditations with written reminders, not because he was uncertain of his own wisdom, but because he knew that unspoken thoughts drift like shadows, while written or spoken ones can be examined in the light. Montaigne, too, believed that the act of confessing doubt was the beginning of liberating the mind from its illusions. Silence, then, is not neutrality. It is fuel for self-doubt. Speaking is not weakness. It is an act of reclaiming power. Each time you bring a hidden fear into the open, you rob it of the mystery that magnifies it. And the more you practice this, the more your brain learns a new pattern. Doubt is not a command. It is a signal, one that can be named, challenged, and transformed. Truth number 8. Self-doubt hijacks your imagination. Your imagination is one of the most powerful tools you possess. It can project a vision of the future, rehearse possibilities, and ignite motivation. But self-doubt knows how to hijack this very gift and turn it against you. Instead of using imagination to create opportunities, you begin to use it to predict failure. You see yourself stumbling before you take a step, rejected before you speak, defeated before you try. The vividness of these imagined failures convinces your nervous system that they are not possibilities, but probabilities. Neuroscience confirms this. Visualization activates many of the same neural circuits as real experience. Andrew Huberman explains that when you repeatedly imagine negative outcomes, your brain wires itself to expect them. The body responds with stress signals, faster heart rate, shallow breathing, muscle tension, even though nothing has actually happened. You are not living failure, but you are training for it, rehearsing it like an athlete practices for competition. The more you rehearse it, the more automatic it becomes. This is the cruel irony. People with rich imaginations, those capable of envisioning great possibilities, are often the ones most paralyzed by self-doubt. Their creative power, instead of fueling growth, becomes a factory of fear. Their mind, capable of designing visions of greatness, builds prisons instead. The philosophers warned of this trap long ago. Seneca wrote that we are tormented more by imagination than by reality. Marcus Aurelius urged himself to see things as they are, not as fear paints them. They knew that the imagination, left undisciplined, exaggerates the future and enslaves the present. The liberation begins when you take back control of what you rehearse. Just as you have trained your mind to anticipate failure, you can retrain it to anticipate progress. Neuroplasticity works in your favor when you consistently imagine yourself acting, overcoming, and moving forward. At first it feels artificial, but repetition makes it natural, and natural makes it automatic. Self-doubt thrives by stealing your imagination and forcing you to work against yourself. But when you redirect this power, you discover the truth. The same mind that enslaves you can set you free. Truth number 9, doubt feeds on your hidden potential. Here's one of the most uncomfortable realities. The louder your self-doubt, the greater your potential often is. Doubt does not usually rise up where there's nothing at stake. It grows strongest where your true capacity threatens to emerge. The more talent, vision, or responsibility you carry within you, the more violently doubt will try to hold you back. It senses that if you step fully into your potential, you will no longer be the same person. You will have to grow, change, and bear a weight that few are willing to carry. Jordan Peterson has often said that responsibility is the path to meaning, and with greater responsibility comes greater resistance. Self-doubt is that resistance. It whispers that you are not ready, not worthy, not prepared enough. But the truth is that this voice grows loud precisely because your life is inviting you to step into something bigger. The pressure you feel is not proof of weakness. It is evidence of magnitude. If you had nothing significant within you, doubt would remain silent. Neuroscience offers clarity here. The brain interprets major opportunities, those that could alter your identity, as threats. Because transformation feels like danger to the nervous system. Andrew Huberman explains that the amygdala, the brain's fear center, activates not only in the presence of external risk, but also when facing internal change. To your biology, becoming more than you are today feels like stepping into the unknown, and the unknown triggers protective doubt. The Stoics understood this paradox in another language. They taught that the obstacles on your path are not barriers, but signals of direction. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." In the same manner, self-doubt appearing strongest at the doorway of your potential is not a sign to retreat, is confirmation that you are exactly where you must push through. So when you feel consumed by doubt in the moments before a leap, remind yourself, this is not proof that you are unworthy. It is proof that your potential is stirring, and your old self is trembling at the thought of its own expansion. Doubt grows loudest right before the threshold of transformation. Step through, and its voice begins to fade. Truth number 10, self-doubt never disappears. It evolves. Many people dream of a day when self-doubt will vanish, when they will finally feel fearless, certain, and immune to hesitation. But this is a myth. Self-doubt never disappears completely. It evolves. The goal is not to destroy it, but to master it, to transform it from a tyrant into a compass. Doubt will always appear at the edge of growth, because growth means entering the unknown. And the unknown always awakens resistance. Aristotle spoke of the golden mean, the balance between excess and deficiency. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the right relationship with fear. Likewise, strength is not the absence of doubt, but the discipline to hear its voice and still move forward. When you stop expecting doubt to vanish, you stop being surprised by its presence. You begin to treat it as a signal. This matters. This will stretch me. This is worth attempting. Neuroscience reinforces this truth. The brain is wired to anticipate risk whenever you move beyond your comfort zone. Andrew Huberman explains that novelty activates both the dopamine system of motivation and the stress system of caution simultaneously. This means doubt is a natural companion of ambition. The presence of doubt does not mean you are failing. It means your nervous system is awake, alert, and aware that you are crossing into new territory. Philosophy teaches the same lesson. Marcus Aurelius did not pray to be rid of obstacles. He prayed for the strength to face them. Doubt, like pain, is part of the human condition. Its purpose is not to stop you, but to remind you that the stakes are real, that your choices matter, that your life is unfolding in a direction that requires awareness. The final shift is this: stop asking, "How do I kill my doubt?" and start asking, "How do I walk with it without letting it rule me?" When you see doubt not as an enemy but as a companion that sharpens your clarity, you stop waiting for perfect certainty and start moving with imperfect courage. Self-doubt never disappears, but when mastered, it becomes proof that you are alive, evolving, and walking towards something larger than yourself. Transformational bridge. Now that you've seen these 10 truths, you may notice something striking. Self-doubt is not the enemy you once believed it to be. It is not a weakness to be ashamed of, nor a curse you must escape. It is a mirror reflecting both your fears and your hidden strengths. The problem has never been the presence of doubt, it has always been how you respond to it. Before today, you may have thought that doubt meant you weren't ready, that your hesitation was proof you were unworthy. But now you see the deeper reality. Doubt appears precisely where growth begins. It thrives on silence, comparison, imagination turned against you, and the fragile ego you try to protect. Yet those same places can become your sources of strength. Speak your fears aloud, and their power fades. Focus on your own path, and comparison loses its teeth. Redirect your imagination, and you train your brain to build rather than destroy. Step beyond ego, and failure becomes expansion instead of collapse. The shift is not about eliminating doubt, it's about mastering its energy. Aristotle's balance, the Stoics' resilience, the neuroscientists' clarity, the philosopher's logic. They all converge here. The measure of your life is not how little you doubt, but how bravely you act in spite of it. So let me leave you with this. The next time doubt rises, and your mind whispers you can't recognize it for what it is, it's not a prophecy. It's a signal that you are standing close to something that matters, something that has the power to reshape your future. And in that moment, you have a choice: retreat into the addictive comfort of hesitation, or step forward into the discomfort that builds strength, resilience, and meaning. Your life will not change by waiting for certainty. It will change the moment you move while doubt is still speaking. That is the test. That is the path.